Hello and welcome to this edition of Diplomats. Today we're speaking to the French Consul General here in Istanbul, Monsieur Hervé Margot. Monsieur Margot, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme.
Thank you and welcome to the Palais de France, the French Palace, or France's Palais. I am very pleased to welcome you here. It's a piece of history, as you know, and the French-Turkish relations are way back in the history. So it's a very good opportunity for me to welcome you here and to say hello to all the people that are watching this program. That I know is.
Well, I'm sure they're going to get a great insight to the relationship between the two countries. Let's start with the history, since you mentioned that. If we go back to the 16th century. Francis I and Suleiman the Magnificent had a wonderful relationship, and they signed bilateral agreements way back in the 16th century, which is about the time that France took this house in Istanbul.
Yeah, in fact, you're perfectly right. We arrived, the first ambassador was here in 1535. But it was not on this land, and in reality we had this land for 5 centuries now, and we were on this land since 1590. I say 1590 because it's important, and it was in the history of France, and I think in the history of diplomatic relations, the first embassy in the world. Before us there were the Venetians and the Genovese. They were here, but as a state France was the first to have the permanent embassy in Istanbul, and the story tells that the protocol and the diplomatic relations really began here at the Sultan's court. So it's a very important piece of history, and France is here on this land for this time.
Well, France has had quite a tremendous history with Turkey over the years, starting way back then. Through World War II, there were some interesting times, of course. And then France had a small spat, I think, with Turkey around 1920, 1921, where there was some hostility, which was soon overcome. And I think it was overcome mostly, wasn't it, by the abundance of trade that Turkey and France were doing together at that stage? Yeah,
I think from the beginning, in fact, from the 16th century, trade was one of the reason of the relation between our two countries. There was some geopolitical reasons, because France and Turkey are at the opposite of the European scene. So there was obviously some geopolitical issues, but then there was trade, and the French, and in particular Marseille, was very much involved in trading with the Ottoman Empire. Then, as you said, throughout the history, we had up and downs, but very good relations for a long time, with some episodic problems, like with Napoleon, when Napoleon went to Egypt, for example. And then we had, just after the First World War, it's true that we had 1 or 2 years difficult, but France was the first Western country to recognize Mustafa Kemal's government, which was a very important issue. And this year will be the 19th anniversary of the recognition of the Turkish Republic by the French government, which will be in October.
Well, certainly trade played a big part during that time. Great that recognition was there, and France is one of the first countries to re-establish very strong trade routes, to the point where now France is second or third trading partner, I think, with Turkey, just behind Germany.
Yeah, it depends on the years, but yeah, between 3 and 4th. Second for investments. I think that's another thing that we need to know. At the moment, in 2010, the bilateral trade was a little bit more than 11 million euros. Almost balanced, a little bit more French export than imports, but it's almost balanced. And the second investors. We have more than 400 French companies working in Turkey. That means work for 100,000 Turks, plus their families. So it's true that our economic relations are very important in our relation. And I used to say that it's one of the 2 pillars, and I think we'll talk about the second pillar in some time, one of the 2 pillars of our presence in Turkey for ages. One is economy, the other one is culture. And this is an important part of our presence in this country.
Well, let's stay with economy just for the time being and take a look at Turkey's very strong geo-economic position in the world. It survived relatively unscathed from the recent economic downturn, the recent global downturn. What part does France play now, since Turkey has emerged from that position to be a much stronger economy than it was before?
You see, when I said more than 400 French companies, second investor, that means that France knows what is the future of the Turkish economy. And I think there is no doubt in the mind of our economic people, our companies, that Turkey has a bright future and that it's really an emerging country and that there is a lot of opportunities to do business in this country and to help at the same time Turkey to enter into the best economies. As you know, there is an objective that the Turkish government for Turkey to be the 10th economy in the coming years, around 2020, and we want to take our part in our share in this endeavor, and I think Turkey has a lot of means to do it.
Yes, if we look at Turkey's position with France and Turkey's desires to grow economically and politically, it wants to be part of the European Union, or it's stated that. France seems to be ambivalent in some way. I remember Monsieur Chirac said that he would go to the French people and have a referendum about whether France would vote yes or no. And of course, the current leader is saying that he is against Turkey being part of the European bloc. What's the overall view from France?
Thank you for the question, because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding there. Yes, our president, Mr. Sarkozy, who was in Ankara some days ago, thinks that Turkey should have a specific place into the organization of Europe. But it doesn't mean that it will be into the European Union. And so there is discussions with the Turkish authorities about this. We understand very well the position of the Turkish government that wants to enter into the European Union. For our part, and the President has said it very clearly, what we envisage, it's a kind of a new organization of Europe with the European Union in one place, and then Russia and Turkey as a kind of a group of countries in the European continent. The President said that he doesn't see Turkey part of the European Union because Turkey has a specific role to play, and that Turkey, with its new diplomacy, with its new economic strength, is really a bridge between the East and the West. And for Turkey to continue to play this role, and it will be, in our opinion, much better that we have very, very close tie with Turkey, but that there is not really an advantage neither for Europe nor for Turkey to be really a member of the European Union. But that doesn't mean that we don't say that Turkey is a very big country. That's on the contrary. And again, the President said it very clearly in Ankara. For us, Turkey is a very important partner. Our economic relations, our cultural relations are proving it. It's simply how you envisage the future of the relationship which we have a difference. But there is no question at all that for us, Turkey is a major partner. It's the question of where does it fit in this new configuration of the world. You know, the world has very much changed in the last years after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reorganization of the powers. And our President's view is that Turkey should play its complete role in this new global order. And that it's very important for Europe to have a Turkey very close to Europe, benefiting from all the experience of Europe. Does it mean that it should be in Europe? And that's something that even the Turks have to think about, and that's our point. The second issue is that we continue to support very much the reform process in Turkey. We think it's very important. We know the role that the European Union has played in this respect, and we are continuing to support it. For example, under the French presidency, 2 new chapters were opened in the negotiation. We all know that it's more and more difficult when we progress because the chapters are more and more complicated. There is at the moment discussions to open a new chapter, but it was not possible under the previous presidency. But France is continuing to support this reform process and will continue to do so. So you say, I think really the issue here is where does all those new groups are fitting in the world order and the European order, and we think that Turkey has a very important role to play as a kind of bridge between East and West, and we see it, for example, with all those crises in the Middle East, and the presence of Turkey in this region is very important.
So with that support in the way that you've described it, would France then disagree with some journalists and writers and academics who would say that Turkey is actually turning its back on the West as a result and moving towards the East? Would you agree or disagree?
I disagree, because I think, taking it to part the question of the European Union, if Turkey asserts itself as a country that has a real diplomacy, that is open to the world, that wants to enhance its relationship with the neighborhood, Turkey will open to other countries. So the only choice of Turkey would not be Europe. It will be all the area and maybe the world in itself. There is a very dynamic diplomacy. There is a lot of embassies opened by the Turks in 2010 in Africa, for example. That means that Turkey is a new actor in the world, and so it's normal that in a way it looks to other regions. But I think that Europe will remain a very strong partner of Turkey. The European market, even if we have an economic crisis at the moment, but the European market, the values of Europe, I think a lot of Turks share the same values than Europe. So no, I think it's normal in a way that Turkey has another profile now. It doesn't mean that it turns its back to Europe.
So would you say that there's an advantage then to other countries in different parts of the world, to Turkey having a new diplomacy and a new position to increase the amount of trade, say, with the Middle East?
Yeah, I think we definitely need more actors. Again, I am referring to the Berlin Wall because I think it was a turning point. It was the end of the East-West struggle, but what we didn't understand at the moment, I guess, is that it completely changed the world order. And so now we are in a world where everybody needs to have his say. And in this respect, it's very important that Turkey, because of its geographical position, because it can express different sensibilities, both from the western part and the eastern part and the Middle East and its Muslim identity. I think it's very important that Turkey has its say in this new order. And that's why the president, and I think again, unfortunately, some journalists didn't see it, that's why the president came to Turkey, even if his trip was very short. There was a lot of discussion about the shortness of his trip, but he came to Turkey for the G20. As you know, France is the president of the G20 for the year 2011, and it was only the second country where the president went as the chair of the G20 after the United States. So I think, it's a very significant thing. We came to tell the Turkish government that we need their help in this endeavor, because the economic order needs, again, everybody to have a say and to participate to the structuration of the economic world. And so that's where he proposed to the Turkish government to organize here in Turkey, and maybe in Istanbul, I don't know what the Turkish government will decide, a meeting on one of the major issues of today, which is the price of commodities, and in particular agricultural commodities, because there is a lot of problems, a lot of tension, and it's very important for the poor people, and the Turks, and as Mr. Babacan said last week, the Turks agreed to this proposal, and there will be this meeting, which is an important one. So you see, that's again, the president made the gesture to come to Turkey. It was important. It was the first time in 20 years that the French president came to Turkey. So I know that there is a lot of things said about our president and his relationship with Turkey, but honestly, he showed there that he thinks that Turkey is a very important partner, that we need Turkey, and that it's for us a partner that we need to have into the circle of those who decide for the world of tomorrow.
So Mr. Sarkozy really has made an effort to mend any of those perceived rifts that may have been there or misreported in the past?
I think so. You will say it's diplomats. It's our role, in a way, to see in the glass the half that is full, and some others would see the half that is empty. But yes, I think it was an important and significant visit. It's true that the Turkish government would have preferred to have a real big state visit, and the president said that he would be happy to come back and to have this visit maybe during this year. But his real first goal was to come as the G20 presidency to show that Turkey was and is an important partner in this G20 events and in this reformulation of the economic order. And I think that was the message. And again, that was the first time in 20 years. And I think you should see when you compare the deepness of our history, thinking that the French president was not in Turkey for so many years. There was a real vacuum, and I think he filled this, and he's committed to continue to have this relationship with the Turkish government.
Yes. We talk about a new world order, we talk about new diplomacy, we talk about everyone having a say, we talked about price of commodities and so on and so forth. So we have to go and look at the Middle East now and look at what's happening there in terms of, gosh, how many countries now? We're talking Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, troubles in Bahrain, Yemen, even in Saudi Arabia, reported troubles there as well. So what impact do you think that this is having on the biggest commodity of all that we all rely on, which is energy?
We have seen that the price of oil has raised a lot. It's true that there will be an impact. I am always a little bit fascinated, and I'm not sure it's the right word in a way. As soon as there is a kind of liberation revolution to more democracy, then you see that the finance people are scared. And all of a sudden you have the price of oil that goes up, and then you have the financing rating that is down. For example, in Tunisia, for us, what is a little bit astonishing is that Tunisia is now in a democratic process, but then its rating was down from the previous situation where there was a dictator. So in a way, that's when I was saying we have to rethink the economic order. It's one part of this. And it shows how important it is that we have some kind of thinking about the economic order. It's not only the political one. So Middle East is a very good example because it has a the political situation has a direct impact into our economics, and not only in the region, but all over the world. We have seen it already with the subprimes, which was a real American issue, and then that spread to Europe and to the rest of the world. So now it's clear that all those events have a very big impact on our lives, and people that think that they can stay in their country and not look at what is going on elsewhere, they are wrong, because it has an impact. And now it's clear that really knowing what will happen in the Middle East, it's a very difficult question. I don't know if there is many experts that can answer your question. We have seen that in Tunisia it was some kind of movement. In Egypt it was very different. In Libya, it's another issue, which there is now a civil war in Libya, which was not the case in Tunisia or in Egypt. So this is very difficult for our experts, because you cannot say that it will spread the same way everywhere.
Difficult questions to answer, of course, but the Middle East still plays a vital role in the price of energy, and it probably will for a very long time to come. There must be some concern about the position of Iran, for example, which is part of the Middle East, and they've recently undertaken some exercises with Syria. sending some warships through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. Is there a view that France has about the position of Iran and what might be the future outcome?
I think for us it's very clear that Iran is a real concern. We have said it repeatedly. We have had actions in the Security Council of the United Nations about the nuclear issue and the development of a military nuclear program by Iran. So yes, we are concerned by the position of Iran, and we hope that Iran will come back on the table of negotiation because we think that it's a real threat for the whole region. The question now will be to assess how all this reconfiguration of the Middle East will impact on the position of the respective countries. So I think will not speak for the Iranians themselves, but I'm sure that they are looking at what is going on with some kind of anxiety.
Let's take a look now away from politics and economy, and let's take a look at culture and the cultural exchanges between France and Turkey. That's also something which goes back quite a long way into history, doesn't it?
Yeah, almost from the beginning. With an acceleration in the 19th century. As you know, before French was the language of diplomacy, but in the 19th century, and more precisely in 1868, the Sultan decided that the French system should be introduced in Turkey for education, and that's where Galatasaray became a French teaching lycée under a French organization. It was organized like a French lycée because one of the issues for the Sultan, because of the fall of the empire and the big setbacks that the empire had suffered during the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th, was education. They thought that they had to solve and to answer the questions by another education, and the French system was at that time the one who seemed to them the one that was conducive to an improvement into the situation of the empire. So since 1868, a lot of the elite in Turkey was coming from this school, and there was a presence of what was religious lycées before. There is 5 here, but that became private lycées after the Republic. So today we have almost 6,000 students into a kind of French education, which is, you know, every year 6,000. It's not a small number. Then there is the University of Galatasaray, and some university where there is French, and then there is the cultural activities. And traditionally there is a lot of exchanges between France and Turkey. Two years ago, in fact 1.5, there was the Turkish season in France, which was a very big success. And I must say an unexpectedly successful year. We thought it would be a good season, but it was more than that, because it spread all over France, showing that it was not only a Parisian issue, you know, a kind of aristocracy of culture, but it spread in a lot of countries, in a lot of cities in France, with a lot of events, and shows that there is a big interest on the cultural side. And then there was Istanbul 2010. Yes. And so a lot of activities that we had during the Turkish season in France came into Istanbul, and then this link was reinforced. And it's true that there is a lot of links between our two countries. For example, Istanbul Modern has an agreement with Beaubourg, the Museum of Beaubourg. The Louvre is working with some museums. So no, yeah, there is a strong presence here.
And in 2006, I was going to ask about that. That was when there was French Spring here in Turkey, which again was a major cultural exchange of artists and artisans between both countries. So it's something that it's very important to France, I think, to maintain that.
Yeah. Again, as I said at the beginning, I really see, apart from the political situation where, you know, politics is something and our leaders speak to each other, but then what is almost as important as our political dialogue is the two pillars of economy we have talked about, is and culture. And that's why really culture for me is where you can have those links, people to people, and work on projects that are long-term projects. And it's clear that as for me as Consul General in Istanbul, culture is a very important issue. We have a French institute that works very well, where you can find books, CDs, but where you can take French lessons, and they are very active. A lot of events, and in all spheres. So for us, and for me in particular, that is an important part of our relationship.
With a very strong cultural bond, greater understanding between two quite different cultures, that also helps to boost economic ties between the two countries as well. So where we are today, moving on from what we talked about earlier about the strength of the economy here in Turkey, how much assistance are you able to give to French companies who want to come and do business here in Turkey?
In fact, we have two pillars. It will be the pillars today. It will be the mission about pillars. But here we have, because we thought that it's one thing to help the French companies to come to Turkey. It's another thing to help Turkish companies to come to France. Mm-hmm. Because one of the issues that we have here, and it's a little bit unfortunate, even though we have this long relationship, people, you have to continue to inform people. They really not know each other. You know, you have always to tell them what is going on in the other country. So the two legs are very important. For the French companies, we have a mission here, economical mission, which names is UbiFrance, who is really dedicated to help the French companies to come to Turkey. They are organizing meetings in Turkey, visit of enterprise, of delegations, and we have the French-Turkish Chamber of Commerce here in Istanbul, which works in parallel with UbiFrance, and that works with the French companies that are already coming to Turkey. So we have those two elements to help the French companies to settle in Turkey and to stay for a long time. For us, in a nutshell, we don't have any problem with the big French companies. The big companies, they have their strategy, they know how to come, they want to invest. That's why France is the second largest investor in Turkey. And you know all the big French companies that here, like AXA, which is the first insurer, like Carrefour, that you find everywhere. But you have Decathlon now, you have a lot of Renault. I forget Renault, you know, it's the first exporter of Turkey is Renault, and the first contributor to the budget of Turkey is Renault with the fisc, so with this the fiscal contribution. So we have Peugeot, Citroën. You see, it's our real issue is to bring the small and medium enterprise, the SMEs. That's the real issue, and that's on the issue on which we work now with UbiFrance in particular, and their bureau is on Istiklal Caddesi, so it's close to the French consulate, and they are really dedicated for this. The second part is that we have opened last year a representation of our Invest in France bureau, which is very active. Because again, we want this relation to be a partnership relationship. And not only the French coming to Turkey, but at the same time the Turks investing in France. For the moment it's not sufficient. There is only a few Turkish companies investing in France. It's true that France and Europe in general is a very mature economy. So maybe the opportunities are not like in the other part of the world in emerging countries. So the Turkish companies, they go to the other countries, but in France you have a lot of opportunities. You can do a lot of business. There is the reputation in France that, you know, the French, they are doing strikes any time, which is not true, and there is a lot of incentive. And it's one of the countries, I think it depends on the year, the first or the second country for investment from abroad. So that means a lot of companies invest in France, and we don't know why, and we don't see why the Turks shouldn't invest themselves. So that's why we created this bureau here in Istanbul, which is at the same place than UB France, and that helps the Turkish companies to invest into our country. We have created a multilingual Turkish-speaking center in France near the airport, Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport, where the Turkish companies can, for 3 or 6 months or a little bit more, stay and invest and investigate the French market.
So like a free zone of some.
Yes, kind of like this, yeah, a kind of where you can find a bureau if you don't want to invest very much, but just to smell the market and to see what are the opportunities. We are giving you the opportunity to stay there for some months and to see how is the market and to decide to invest or not. And it's an environment, a flat of bureaus, you know, and with people speaking Turkish there to help all those companies. So
the creation of a very nice environment for them to feel comfortable. Yeah. Turning back the other way, you mentioned SMEs and smaller companies which would like to come to Turkey to invest. Now, Turkey is rated at the moment by European Central Bank and various rating agencies just below investment level. There is talk that may raise in the not too distant future. But given that it is just below, is there any fear of investing in Turkey?
Honestly, I don't see this fear. And again, coming from the French companies, I don't see it at all. I have a small example for us. Last year, it was very difficult for the French to find a place at the French school, because there were so many French companies coming and so many new French families that you know, we have now to think about a new lycée. So I don't see that there is this big issue of investing in Turkey. The French community in Istanbul has doubled in 4 years. So we are not talking about 20 years, we are talking about 4 or 5 years, and it has doubled. And it has doubled mainly because of the arrival of French companies. So that's, I don't think that there is for the moment a big problem. Now, I guess the problem will begin if it will be downgraded. So there you will begin to see people questioning themselves. But since the trend is upward, I think it's conducive to new investments. That's clear.
Michel Margot, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
You're most welcome.
That was Hervé Margot. He's the Consul General of France here in Istanbul. I'm Stephen Marnie. This is Diplomats. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye for now.